What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another HYDRA AI castover. We're going to take another look at the second Terran map. I will note that I don't think there's been any change to the map itself, besides maybe I think there was a null terrain bug or something that I fixed after the previous castover, which I believe was also on this map. But yeah, it's been many days, many months even, I think, at least 1 or 2 months since the last castover. And I'm bringing you a look at where HYDRA is at now for those who only follow through these updates. Realize that I've left you by the wayside there, unless you were paying attention to the mod streams or like the GitLab change log. I mean, just the fact that we're on GitLab now should tell you something, because obviously before we were on GitHub. And it's amazing the difference 3 letters can do for you. But that's what we find ourselves, that's the position we find ourselves in now. So HYDRA has had a huge change, actually a number of huge changes. There was a push to make the early game a lot more varied with regards to what strategies you were able to employ, while still remaining balanced in terms of risk assessment, risk reward, that sort of thing. So if you recall the old Terran build orders of going Armory into Starport or something for a fast 2-port Wraith build or something like that, that was my preferred strategy during Fraud Nights and whatnot back in the day. Back a couple months ago, before we made all these changes, now you can simply build a barracks, factory, or starport as your first production structure, because all of those structures require is a command center. It's much the same for Protoss, where the big differences there are that the Gateway Robotics Facility and Stargate all require a Nexus. And for Zerg, Spawning Pool, Hydralisk Den, and Spire, as well as Evolution Chamber, all just require a hatchery. There's been a ton of other changes. I'm not going to bother recapping them all, recounting every single one of them to you here, but I suppose I can leave a link directly to the README, or rather the changelog at GitLab, which will allow you to read up on some of the more significant changes. At some point we do have the table of contents, that one, so that you can navigate between the patches themselves, but suffice it to say there have been a number of really high scope, broad scope changes to the game. And one of the other things that changed massively beyond just the accessibility of tech in the early stages and the interdependence of certain tech, like now Protoss, for example, need to build a new structure for every single unit they want. But the other case was like Terrans now have a more, I guess, free-form tech tree where they build one tech structure and they get tier 2, all of tier 2 unlocked. And then they build another tech structure and they get all of tier 3 unlocked. And that's basically the approach that we went for, with Zerg also having a similar kind of approach to Terran, except they build one structure to unlock tier 2 and they evolve that structure to unlock tier 3. It's like a nerve center for them in some way. I'll talk a bit more about that as we encounter some of that stuff in this castover, but I figured I would brief everybody on the changes themselves first before jumping in, because it's a very different HYDRA than you saw in the previous castover, and I figured warrants some sort of understanding. But yes, the other big change is upgrades have been removed, besides tiered upgrades. We simply don't have the ability to remove them, but I'll talk about why those upgrades were removed as we get in, and of course what we ended up doing in their stead. And you know, that you might expect that that's a huge chunk of gameplay lost, but honestly it doesn't really feel like it in practice, and we'll talk a bit about why that is just now, once we get in. So you also may notice that we have a nifty little counter there, so I'll actually turn the frame counter off as a result, because we have this little counter that Veek ended up implementing. To brief people on the map and what to expect in the map, you start out over here if you're playing this map in single player, and you can otherwise pick between the two starting locations, red and blue. This is the Magistrate's position, and this is the Sons of Core Hall position, led by, what's-her-face, Kerrigan. Over here we got Randall. Now he's an enemy because you nuked him or something. And then over here we have the Confederates, led by, I think, Tom Ratchet, but I don't actually remember who I decided to give that to. This might actually be somebody completely different. Don't remember. And then we actually have a returning cast from the first mission. We got Zaz over here, Goran up top, and smack in the middle, dangerously close to Randall, Eric. So Zaz will be a particularly focal point of our commentary, because I've been studying his build lately, trying to figure out some issues with the AI themselves, and we will be talking about just how they work out. So yeah, there you go. One of the other big changes that is smaller in terms of what it actually does, but still quite large, generally speaking, in terms of its impact is hatcheries now cost 25 less minerals, which is obviously a very small change, but the main reason was I rebalanced the costs of all production structures, and obviously the added availability, the increased ease of access availability for those production structures of various tiers, if you will, for all the other races are now, it sort of warrants a little bit of a rebalancing for Zerg as well, I think. So that's been a relatively large change. But I was talking about upgrades earlier, so we'll continue in that regard. We have some Zerglings over here. They do get a reduced amount of movement speed increase, not the full extent of metabolic boost, but they always move at a consistent speed now. And they have a reworked version of adrenal glands. We actually had reworked the upgrade itself before removing the upgrade and rolling it into a default unit behavior. So they attack faster if they've been allowed to attack a target. It doesn't matter if it's the same target or not, but as long as they're in combat landing attacks, each attack increases their attack speed. I think they need something like 6 or 7 or 8 attacks to really get fully charged. But the idea is that they become increasingly more dangerous the longer they remain alive and in combat, which I think actually ends up fitting very well with the overall concept of the unit. When you see them in action, at first it's almost disarming. It's like, oh, they're not attacking that fast, right? But they don't get up to the same degree that old adrenal glands gave them, so they'll never really be cracklings. But the idea is that they get closer to it, and they can have this behavior at all stages of the game, right? Similar to Burrow, no longer requiring a research, as you can see, but with the AI spinning with all of their units burrowing. That's a key point, because the idea is that now you have this fixed understanding of what these units actually do at all stages of the game. And that's one of the reasons why I want to get rid of tiered upgrades as well, because that will play, basically shift the kinds of things that you're even able to expect from units as the game goes on. Now, there is one caveat here, in that we actually have a significantly distinct setup for abilities. Some abilities require tech structures, but they don't require research. So those were another thing that was axed in theory, but the idea is that Stimpack requires you to build an academy. And as long as you have an academy, your Marines can use Stim. Speaking of Marines using Stim, they wish they had, and they also wish that I had added kiting micro from iQuare, which is in the works, but not quite done yet. It's actually like WIP, if you want to call it that. Some SCVs are getting bullied. Now, notably, you'll actually get an opportunity to see the charged up attack. This is the full attack speed of Zerglings. From the first frame of the game, they can get up to this point, and they are absolutely destroying this Confederate mineral line. This might actually be curtains for them very early on. They do have a second starport finishing and a third almost done, and the Wraith is trying to do some work. They didn't quite garrison the bunker there, but it looks like they've been able to turn that around. Meanwhile, Randall getting butchered by Zerglings. Arak doing work again, so in this case you're going to see him charge up as well. I think after the kiting micro is implemented, we will have a few more changes in store for some other things as well, like worker micro and stuff. I don't really know what iQuare's sort of plan of attack is, but that is regardless, it's a very crippling loss to lose that many SCVs if you're the Confederate player, or if you're Randall, indeed. He also lost a large number of SCVs, and it doesn't seem like there's been that much action on this side of the map, so it looks like Kerrigan has been allowed. Well, that was an interesting Spider-Man. I think it was just landing or something like that. I'm not really sure. But yeah, Kerrigan has been allowed to get her 2 factory opening, now ascending to 3, because 3, and setting up an expansion. Looks like, meanwhile, the Magistrate deploying some barracks. I don't remember if the barracks and factory and starport collision size changes were already implemented in the previous castover. I'm pretty sure they were, but I've lost a large semblance of what makes sense time-wise, so I don't fully recall. It feels like it was just a few days ago that we had upgrades and completely different tech progression, and now we have something completely different. One of the reasons why I wanted to do all of this stuff related to removing upgrades and whatnot, I was inspired by a podcast that I did with Mesk. It is the most recent podcast as of the recording. I think it was episode 51, where we talked about tech tree progression and how Mesk had aimed to provide this expression of power based on your tech level, how you would have access to very different tools, and that the way things would be balanced is more so around costs of high-tech units. My concern with his approach initially, not having, admittedly, I had not done my due diligence and asked him questions about what his approach might have been like and how he might have changed things around, and to avoid some of the potential issues that I had thought of. But one of my main concerns with his approach to the tech tree design was actually related to the fact that it felt like you would just have a large number of units that were just overlapping in their combat role. And that is something that is apparently, according to his sort of thought process, his idea was to fix that by having costs really heavily balance the units. So if you've got a series of units that are like, here's your tier 1 zealot and your tier 2 zealot, or your tier 1 marine and your tier 2 marine, well, your tier 2 marine may cost, I don't know, 1.5 or 2 times as much. He didn't give exact figures, but just spitballing ideas. The cost will determine whether or not you can actually field this tier 2 marine, and this tier 2 marine is going to have this ability or that ability, or this behavior or that behavior, and these stats are going to be upgraded. So you're almost rolling in the upgraded tier of weapons and armor that is normally a fire and forget upgrade, where you just get it and you'd forget about it. There's no skill expression after you've already gotten the resources and time afforded to actually get the upgrade in the first place. After that, there's no interaction at all. But in the case of a unit that actually has that behavior rolled in by default, we see a significant difference in how this whole thing plays out. Coming back to the game for a moment, it does look like the Magistrate's going to, do some pretty big damage to Zaz. He has not yet gotten a third expansion. It looks like maybe he tried to over here and was probably denied en route, but this Sunken is not going to last very long. It was good for a couple of marine kills, but the one ghost over here armed himself with quite a few kills, picking off Zerglings and Mutas and just generally doing full damage to the Muta. So everything that they have here, the Marines dealing normal damage, the Ghost dealing concussive, all of that is super effective against a Zergling Mutalisk player for obvious reasons. So somehow Arak has managed to take the natural of the Confederate player, so that's pretty funny. But he's going to have to turn his units around to deal with the red mech force that is knocking on his door. But I'm not sure if Zaz can actually get himself out of this one, because he might be able to, tell these guys to go fuck themselves and pick those guys off. But there's another bio squad in the works, and even more units being produced and stuff. So this is one of the dangers of playing against the HYDRA AI, is precisely the fact that if you leave them alone and you let them macro up and you let them get to 2-3 plus bases, it becomes so challenging to root them out. You really have to be harassing their economy and or contesting their land grabs and stuff like that. And so while Zaz lives to build another drone and mutate another day, I'm not convinced that he's actually going to be able to repel the next large-scale attack that comes at them, even of the existing size that he just dealt with, or of greater size, which seems likely given the fact that, again, these players have been allowed to get to 2 bases each. 2 base Terran in HYDRA is pretty dangerous. I mean, it's pretty dangerous even in the vanilla game. And as we see Magistrate actually grabbing a 3rd base, which probably means Kerrigan's not far behind in that regard. So this is the Overlord Iris. I did mention that the Nerve Center is something that actually exists in the Zerg tech tree now. And so this unlocks Lair, but it also unlocks Basilisk Den, Lurker Den, Nathrok Lake, which is a structure we actually have not seen yet. I don't know if, yeah, still not being morphed over here yet. That unlocks a flying Zergling morph. And then you've got, obviously the Spire is unlocked by tier 1, but you unlock basically everything that the Lair used to give you, or anything that previously in HYDRA was given to you by the Lair, you get from the Overlord Iris now, including the Lair itself. Like, the Lair requires the Overlord Iris before you can get to it. So you basically are separating out the Nerve Center aspect of the Hatchery Lair Hive from the production side of things. And now they're 2 distinct entities, which, again, I'm sure some people would look at that and think that maybe that's flying counter to the design philosophy that was present in the original Starcraft. But get ghosted, idiot. We're not going to see it in action, but this spider mine tooltip here with this bugged tooltip and bugged icon is actually a lobotomy mine that has been implemented, mostly courtesy of iQuare. And the AI will not use it in this particular map. I have not. I'm not even sure if the support for the order is active, but regardless, they probably wouldn't use it very intelligently, even if it was. So more development time needs to be put into that, but essentially it's a replacement for lockdown, and it acts like a spider mine, and it immobilizes any mechanical units that trigger it, so assuming it actually lands. And it will also slow organic units, so it's and it won't aggro onto air units, but if air units are in its area of effect, it will deal damage to them. This is a fucking graveyard of Zerg units, but it does look like Red's attack force has finally been cleaned up, and he may live to regret, or she may live to regret leaving the Confederates intact, although they are still on a puny single base with shit upgrades, so who knows. Speaking of shit upgrades, that is something that I've been trying to figure out. Hi, I'm in your base killing your drones. And now you need an overlord over here. I have been trying to figure out why the AI just generally does not like to upgrade anymore. I think they think that upgrades are actually removed completely and that tiered upgrades are no longer necessary. But it's probably more the fact that the build orders have been shuffled around so heavily now that the AI is not yet actually building sufficient armories, dry docks, academies for the sake of upgrading. Like, if we look over here, I do see one armory. Armories are now only, like, the only thing armories are responsible for is vehicle upgrades now. But you saw over here, I didn't really click on it or anything, but there was a dry dock. Yeah, here you go. So the dry dock is the ship upgrade station now. And there's probably an academy somewhere for this guy, if I can find it. Yep. Academies are bio now. This is an amazing base layout, by the way. 10 out of 10. Meanwhile, for Zerg, evolution chambers upgrade everything, including air upgrades. And the fact that this guy has 2 spires but only 1 evolution chamber means that I did not do my due diligence updating that build order, basically, because he really is supposed to have way more than that. So that's just one of the casualties of dealing with the various updates that you make. You know, these are very large, sweeping changes to the game state, and there's just so many different edge cases that I failed to account for in every one of my travels. Speaking of failing to account for stuff, Arak failed to account for not having any money, so he's out. Bye. And meanwhile, it looks like Gorn will soon follow, given his... He's setting up a third, but his natural is being destroyed, and I don't think he has sufficient resources to reinforce that sort of approach. Zaz has lost his third as well. It looks like it'll be a home team victory, which was probably the outcome before as well. But at least you got to see it happen with some new units. You know, you got the Southpaw over here, an explosive damage dealing sort of disruption unit. Every attack that they fire off successfully results in a slow being applied to the unit, and basically it has stacks. So the more stacks you have, the slower you attack, and the slower you move as well. And that can go... Oh, no, I think it's just movement speed, actually. My mistake. So the movement speed can drop down all the way to 100%, which means the unit literally can do only... It can only attack. It cannot move. This doesn't last very long currently, and it also takes a while to get to. I think they need 20 attacks to actually get to that point. So the balancing is still a little off and definitely needs to be resolved. As you can see, there's a million broodlings over here. Enjoy that. If there's a queen around, that might actually help turn the tide over here. But, so suffice it to say, the Southpaw's balancing is still leaving a bit to be desired, but we should be able to see some pretty interesting things out of them. And they are an entry-level unit, a tier 1 unit. I didn't really explore the Terran tech tree too much for you guys. We're finally seeing the Nathrok Lake come out, though, so you might see some Nathrok cores before it all is said and done. This is a pretty hostile force against them, though. The Marines and Goliaths are pretty good at picking them off, and as you can see with these unupgraded mutas, they are dying horrible deaths. Even though there's not really that many great upgrades. Like, yeah, red's at 2-2, but at this timing, you'd expect... Well, maybe that is close to what you would expect. Double Academy. I like how he's got a double Academy. I don't know if, meanwhile, our bio-focused player has a double Academy. I might... that might not be the case. There might not... Oh, there is a second one. It's just not blinking. Shout out to DF for making an updated animation for that a long time ago. So there's the Nethraka Lake. Yes, it's disgusting. Thankfully, it's obfuscated by some of the other Zerg buildings. And yes, its wireframe is a trap because I replaced a trap with it. So many unit IDs got cannibalized. Can't wait till we don't have to worry about that anymore in the new engine. Confederate player has attempted to get a natural. It looks like he's actually got something going on here. And he has been able to upgrade his air units to 1-1. But that's about it. Does he even have an engineering bay? So the engineering bay unlocks tier 2. Science facility unlocks tier 3. And there's a new structure called Quantum Institute that unlocks tier 4. Although not really much is enabled by unlocking that as of right now. But yeah, so the engineering bay is now solely focused on providing a tech up. If you're asking a ton of questions about what does this mean, and what if the academy has infantry weapons, what does the engineering bay do? And I'm sort of answering this very slowly and out of order, but the gist of it is you really don't know until you actually play and see all these updates for yourself. Oh, he's standing on a high ground, or on an unpathable terrain, so of course. This is the Nathracor melee range man. AI script limit reached. Hopefully we can extend that at some point. Pretty epic. But, well, I guess it'll go away pretty soon as this guy's fucking base dies, so it's not really that important, I guess. A monstrous 3 base AI over here. We got a 4th base coming out for the Magistrate, but 3 bases for them currently. And they are, this joint operation of them absolutely eviscerating the entirety of the Confederate base will soon come to a close. I mean, they already have like a small standing force over here that they're using for defense, and they're like massing up for another attack. There's a giant attack force over here that will pick this base off too, and then it'll be curtains. Confeds never really had what it took as soon as they lost all their SUVs in the early game to Zerglings. So yeah, a nice little demonstration of what's over here. You may have noticed that our water seems to be animating at a very slow rate. I have not actually seen that before, but I'm also getting a little bit of FPS drag when I'm moving the camera around. Yet the gameplay seems fine. Like, units are moving and attacking at the right speeds. So I don't know how we end up with this lagging and the camera lagging, but not the game lagging. Anyway, that's largely due to the debug plugin. Yeah, it is actually going at a lower frame speed. It's really weird. But that is due to the debug plugin being, or not the debug plugin, the AI script extension plugin that is responsible for all those features that we're using. But yeah, that's the reason. It's in debug mode, which is why I kept saying debug plugin. So we'll get that resolved at some point. Just an infinite number of sieges, as you can see. I wonder if there's a science facility anywhere. I don't see one, so they must be either keeping their money low or just ignoring the science facility because it's not high enough priority, which I wouldn't really be surprised at the latter. I would be surprised at the former. If they're actually keeping their money low this late into the game, let's just say my AI scripts are more epic than expected. But I can just test that right now. Oh wow, they actually have under 1,000 gas and very low minerals. Oh, and then the game crashed. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's related to the AI debug plugin being used when there's some weird extended shit happening, or if it's because of an actual crash. It's just my luck that I wouldn't be able to know that. But anyway, that's a lovely way for that to end. I would not have expected that, that's for sure. But yeah, I'll just deafen myself here. and actually turn the music on at a reasonable volume. It resets when you crash, unfortunately, if you had just set it up. So yeah, that's pretty much that. That's where we are. Don't mind the off-center Rebel Yell text. And hey, if you want to know if that crash is legit or not, you can play the latest version of HYDRA yourself and then yell at me via email or Discord or YouTube comments when you figure it out, whether or not it crashes or not. That's one way you can give back to this project, is yelling at me whenever something crashes. Please don't actually do that, because then I would forever be yelled at and there would never be an end to it. But I hope you enjoyed this little update, this little bringing you up to speed, as much as you can be brought up to speed with the sheer number of changes that have happened. I hope I did a reasonable job in that respect. So I guess we'll wait and see when it comes to all that. But this has been a HYDRA AI castover. I am surprised that the game went the way that it did, because I was not expecting such early action out of the Zerg, but it looks like we're getting a little bit closer to where we need to go. Not quite there yet, because the Zerg did still do some really stupid shit, but we're on the way. And obviously we're just correcting some edge cases, like upgrades not being assembled properly. We will handle that pretty soon. So stay tuned, look out for some updates over in the GitLab link, check the README or the changelog if you're looking for a complete overhaul understanding of what the fuck is going on and what has happened since the last AI castover, which was apparently before the Starcraft Let's Play. That was a really long time ago. And look out for more of these in the future as I end up slapping together some more maps for AI battles to happen over and all that good shit. So thanks for hanging out, and thanks for contributing to the development of the best mod that Brood War has ever seen. Bye!